Hey guys, Felipe here, and I'm just wanted to redo the video due to poor quality on why I hung up the uniform part two, and that video is basically covering the monitors. So for those of you who don't know what that is, and if you think about joining the Marine Corps, a lot of if you after your first term and potentially even in your first term, who determines where you go where is based off of these people who are called the monitors, and they fill the quotas that need to get filled at the duty stations, the units, whatever unit you end up going to. Um, they pretty much hold your future in their hands. The second piece of the video is talking about PME, professional military education. So each time you go through ranks, you're required to hit a certain PME. So like if you're a E3, you do Lance Corporal's course. If you're a E4 or corporal, you do corporal's course before you can get what's it's like you want to see it for your next promotion because it makes you look good. It puts you ahead of your peers. Sergeant's course, staff NCO, right? Careers course, and every rank has essentially their PME, so a course that is supposed to prepare you for the next rank or for the rank that you are in if you already are in that rank. Um, Secondly, that's the second one. The third piece is so PME and how they determine who goes where. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna talk to you guys about in why I hung up the uniform part two. Um, so the video quality was like kind of shitty, so I apologize. And I did it like at night on the way home from work, and yeah, it wasn't good quality, so I wanted to redo it. And I also cursed a lot, so I apologize for that because I'm very passionate about this because I don't think the military does a good job at this, and so let's get started with the monitors, and I'll recap like my interaction with the monitors, and I'll give you some recommendations maybe um, to what you could do to maybe have a better experience than I did with the monitors. Okay, so um, as I drive here from my workout. All right, so um, my first interaction with the monitor, right? So if you're an officer or you plan to go to the officer route, your first duty station isn't really. It can either be given to you like your top choice, or it may not be in your hands. So what they told us when I went through the basic school was that if you got your like top three choice of job that you wanted as an officer, then you didn't get to choose the duty station. That was kind of taken away from you. However, if you didn't get the job that you wanted, so like anything above like top three or top five, um, whatever cutoff they had set it at, then you got to choose the duty station, right? So you would submit like your job list of like 1 through 26, because that's how many officer jobs there were when I went through, and then the duty stations. What duty station would you want to go to? And you can't select the the base. You can just select like West Coast, East Coast, overseas. That's kind of how you select it. You don't choose. I want to go to this specific unit on this specific base. That's not how that works. So um, you'll choose the location, and then they'll see what positions are open, and they'll determine if they're going to send you there or not. So if I didn't, so I was a supply officer and I didn't get to choose. That was like my seventh choice. So they gave me my duty station, which was I selected West Coast because I was like, you know what, I'm from the West Coast. I'd rather be closer to home, closer to family, be able to drive home on the weekends if I want to, and have that opportunity. And again, I already had spent several months in Virginia, and I was like, you know what, the East Coast ain't for me. And I didn't really care about overseas. I think I put West Coast overseas, then East Coast, because I just didn't want to be in the East Coast. And I would have rather taken overseas, or I would have done West Coast, which is what I got, West Coast, because I didn't get to choose. I didn't get to choose what job I wanted, right? I kind of got shafted out of that. So got to Camp Pendleton, went to Headquarters Battalion, 1st Marine Division, and then like a year and some change later, I went to 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, And at that time, I got hit up by my monitor, who was Captain Albin. I was already a first lieutenant, and Major Albin or Captain Albin at the time, he just like asked me if I plan to stay in. He asked me, "Hey, are you gonna career designate?" And this was around the like March time frame, when I had to like I was getting close to that point where I needed to elect whether or not I was gonna career designate and stay in for another tour, right? So I had good fit reps. I had really good fit reps, and fit reps, for those of you who don't know what it is. So as a junior officer, E1 O1 to O3 or O1 to O2, you get semi-annual reports, which is you get a report from your boss depending how well you did. So they determine how well you did. So Major Albin calls me up and he's like, "Hey, are you gonna career designate or not?" Right? So I told him yes, I was. Like, I didn't want to leave the unit and in like a bad position because I was gonna deploy with them. We're gonna come back and then I was gonna EAS or I was gonna stay in. Well, I elected to career designate and take on another set of orders, right, to my next duty station. Well, that's all I heard from him. And a few months went by, and I get like pulled into my XO's office, my executive officer, and my executive officer is a major, and I think Captain Albin had picked up major at that point, and what ended up happening was that Major Albin told my executive officer, who's second in command in our unit, right? So you got the commanding officer and the executive officer. The monitor, Major Albin, told my boss, my XO, that, hey, I've tried to reach Lieutenant Gomez. He's not answering his emails. He's not answering his phone. I don't know what's going on with him. I've tried multiple attempts to get a hold of him, and I can't get a hold of him. And so my XO, like, on speaker, right? Like, he has him on speaker, and I'm like, every email I've ever had come in from the monitor, I always blind CC'd my XO, and I never CC'd them because monitors act different, or people act different when they are not on, when it's just you and them, right? But if you like start CCing higher ranking officers or personnel, they start to act a little different, and I didn't want that influence in my email traffic because I wanted to show my XO what kind of person he was, right? And so what I ended up doing is, once he like hung up, I was like, "Hey, sir, just so you know, every email I've ever received from him, I blind CC'd you in." And the thing, and I'll talk about this as well, as a supply officer, your boss is the executive officer, unless for whatever reason you did poor and they put you under the S4 captain. But he's your boss. So I was always transparent with him. I told him everything. I never hid anything from him or my commanding officer. So he was on my side. Um, Anyways, so the major tried to throw me under the bus. I send him my top 15 choices, right? He sends me a list. He's like, "Hey, send me your top 15 choices given this, and um, then we'll go from there." Well, I sent him my top 15 choices, and I didn't get any of them. So I was like, "Well, what was the point of sending you and doing all this work and doing the research of the duty stations, the positions, and like what these entire what was captured in all those, and was like didn't make sense for me to go to any of these. I really wanted to stay on the West Coast, nothing further than like Texas, going to the East Coast. But that didn't happen. I think the major just like didn't like how everything went down with me, my major, and him, because my XO, my executive officer, had my back, right, and went to bat for me with this major, and so he kind of screwed me over, but that's okay. And I was like, you know what? I signed up for this. Like, I will do what is required of me. I'm serving my country, and I'm gonna be the best officer there I can be. So I go to Quantico. I get back from deployment. I got about a month. I'm checking out, and then I take a December. I was off almost like the entire December. I was I had 3 weeks of vacation, and then that included my travel time to Virginia, and I drove my 5.0 Mustang. And I'm like, I checked in. I didn't really like the what had happened. What had happened because I deployed with Second Battalion, Fourth Marines. I did the workup with them, and I was like, you know what? I really want to deploy. I don't want to leave you guys with a new lieutenant. So we're out. My replacement was already on inbound. So he was arriving in June. We're gonna deploy in June. We're gonna be back in November, December timeframe, and I didn't want to leave my unit like that, right? Like my Marines, like everybody I've worked so hard with and built those relationships. All our culminating event is a deployment, right? You do the workups, all the hikes, all the training events, the 6 weeks in 29 palms, like everything you go through, like it's for that deployment. And I did all that. So for me to leave before the deployment didn't make sense. So I asked for I asked my command if I could stay. They reached out to the monitor and they reached out to my gaining command. So the unit that I was gonna go to next, they already had scheduled me, right? So they were like, hey, he's gonna arrive in December, or he was gonna arrive in August time frame, or June July time frame of 2021. I'm sorry, of 2020. And the command was like, hey, he did the workup. Can we keep him to deploy? And the unit in Virginia was like, yeah, go ahead, keep him. And my command was like, hey, he'll be ready to hit the ground running as soon as he gets back from deployment. Well, when I checked into my unit, here's what happened. I get there, it's January 4th, right? I had to buy my house on deployment because I don't know, I've never done house hunting leave or anything like that. So when you check in a new unit, they're like, you rate 10 days of house hunting leave, and so you can get your housing and everything situated, um, your household goods, anything that's coming in. Well, I didn't rate any of that apparently because my command told the gaining command that I was going to be ready to hit the ground running when I got there. So I get there and I'm like, hey, sir, like I bought the house sight unseen. I gotta replace the carpet because man, like the carpet had stains. I had to repaint the house. So there's a lot of things I had to do to the house because the people that had lived there, I mean, they'd lived there since they bought the house, like 20 years. And my XO was like, no, like, your command told us that you're gonna be ready to hit the ground running when you got here. So I didn't get my 10 days. I think I only got like one day. I got like a Friday off and then Saturday, Sunday. So I had to like schedule everything in that time frame and make it happen. So like that was like how that played out. And then so it kind of made me think, and I started like really think about like, hey, where am I gonna go? Like, what does my future look like? Do I want to stay in and as long as I can, or do I want to transition out after this term, which was obligated 2 years, but the orders was for 3 years, right? So after the obligated 2 years, then I could essentially transition out if I submit my package. So I started planning, and I was like, okay, what do I want to do? I want to get my master's in business administration, and I could go make way more money. Doing the research at the time, like equivalent to my job, I could go make way more money. Doing logistics, supply chain in the civilian world, get my master's in business, utilize my GI Bill, and so I reached out to my monitor because I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to transition out. I want to do it like November of 2023. That way I can like kind of backwards plan. I'll start my MBA program in September, August, September time frame. I'll be on terminal leave because I had tons of vacation days, guys. Like I had like over 70 or 80 days. I think I had close to 90, and I had to use like 20 of them because of like the whole COVID. You were able to accumulate a little more than that. So I had to start using some, but I was going to have 60 days by the time I transitioned out. So I was able to transition out 60 days early and, start school September. And I got October off while still collecting that captain pay salary, paycheck pretty much. So, and, well, I reached out to the monitor. I was like, hey, here's my plans. This is what I plan on doing. And, she was like, well, why November? And so, obviously I told her my plans, and she was like, well, what if you stayed until February, and I'll make sure that your replacement is inbound. That way you can have a transition between February, and to like April, May, and you'll transition over the summer, and then you can start that school year in 2024, fall of 2024. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you know what? Like, I am willing to do that for the Marine Corps for my unit because I genuinely care about my reputation, my work ethic, like the work that I've done at this unit. I wouldn't want it to go to waste. Well, that fell through because that monitor, that person that's moving those people around, she is also a captain. She's also just a Marine, just like me, who gets orders every 2 to 3 years. And she got orders to go somewhere else. She went back to the force, right, to the fleet. And so the monitor billet is just like a B billet, right? It's a position that's not from your normal duties. Like I do supply and logistics. If I took that billet, I wouldn't be doing supply and logistics. I'm shuffling people around, determining what's best for the Marine Corps, what units need what with personnel. So she got moved as well, right? And her replacement came in, and when I had emailed her like, hey, like, you know what, like, what's going on with the plan, is it still good a year later, right? Like, or as I'm getting close to submitting my transition package and everything, because you can submit it up to like 14 months. And yeah, so if you're an officer and you want to transition out, you submit your resignation package, and you can do that up to 14 months prior to the day that you want to resign, right? Or like in your time in your contract. So if you have 2 years left on your obligated time of service, you can do it 14 months backwards planning. So um, you'll serve like you'll serve the 10 months, and then the other 14 months you can submit your package starting that, so you can transition out at your exactly 2 years as you complete your obligated time of service. Well, anyways, the new captain that took over for the previous one, he was like, "Hey, that does not that is not applying anymore. Like your agreement that you had made with Captain so and so is not in effect anymore. This is what is going to happen. Like if you want to transition in November, I won't be able to get your replacement until like after winter or in the summer because they don't normally do off cycle moves, right? So even in December timeframe, that's an off cycle move. So they like to move all the people in the summer for the most part. That's why you get all those big moves. It gets busy to transition during the off cycle, right? Which is in December. Well, the monitor was pretty much like, hey, if you would want to transition out, then you would have to find your replacement, which also was the unfortunate thing because guess what? My command wasn't going to let me transition out without a replacement. So they weren't going to let me leave on skill bridge. So if you guys don't know what skill bridge is, it's at the time for me, you were able to do up to 6 months of an internship with a company so that we transition out in hopes that you get a full-time offer in that position or job experience so that you can transition easier out of the military and into a civilian job. Well, I was trying to take advantage of that, and the command wasn't going to approve me unless my replacement was on deck because my staff NCO, my chief, wasn't really strong. He was actually very weak, and the command just didn't trust it. So, yeah, so he gave me like a list of people that were like slotted to move, and so I started reaching out to them, and I was like, hey, this position here at Marine Corps Quantico, Marine Corps Base Quantico, is really good. Like I had to sell it to them, like, hey, what's your plan? So really, what I did is I asked those people that were on the block to transition, like, hey, what is your plan? Do you plan to do one more term and get out, or do you plan to do like 20 years, or stay in like more than one term? And the people, depending on what they told me, then I would kind of tailor that to them. So the last one I had, and the captain, he was like, hey, I just want to do one more tour. He was coming from the infantry, similar background as me. He was like, I want to do one more tour and call it a day. And I was like, dude, this is the place for you because one, it's not heavy. Like the workload is not that heavy. You're not going out and doing hikes. You're not doing field operations. You're more on base, and you're able to. It's kind of more of a 9 to 5. So you're able to do courses, night classes, do anything that you need to get done to make sure that you transition successfully in that position, which I didn't lie about that, right? But, I did kind of finesse a little bit of like, hey, like the people, the relationships, the current like leadership there, it was okay. But pretty much like I didn't lie about the position, right? Like I told him like, hey, this is what it is. It's you're a supply officer, like you're gonna be doing that. Um, you may have an extra billet because we were a smaller unit. Um, so yeah, and so I got him. I sold it to him. He came in. We did a little bit like we didn't even do that much of a turnover because when he checked in, I was kind of on my way out, and which was like summer of 2023. However, what I made sure was that I did a good transition for him. So everything that he needed to get done for like the next 6 months was done. Like he would come in and kind of just relax, kind of just make sure things kept flowing smoothly, and yeah, so that worked out for me. But the monitors screwed me twice. Like, and I had to do that work. Like when the monitor's job is to move people around, like that's their sole job. Like they're there to work for you. And granted, like what's good for the Marine Corps, but like if you don't have a good relationship with your monitor, you're most likely gonna get shafted. Like you're not gonna get what you want. Um, I would also be like transparent with your command of everything that is going on with your monitor, because that way they can defend you or they can help you to achieve your goals, right? Because last thing you want is to transition out and then you're salty like me because you're like, dude, I just got screwed. And I'll lean into this a little more with my second topic, which was PME, your professional military education. How they select you for that is a big deal, and it impacts your future in the Marine Corps, right? Because if you don't get selected for that job and you went and took another job, or sorry, you don't get selected for that school to go get your training and you went and did another job, same as me, right? I went from supply officer to supply officer billet when I should have gone supply officer billet to, or my job, my MOS for that one term, gone to PME and then gone back to that position. Well, that didn't work out for me. I went from job to job where people were going from job to education and then to job because now they've completed their requirements for promotion, right? So now they look even better. When the people that were getting elected for these schools, which for an officer, you're either going to go to Expeditionary Warfare School, EWS, or you're going to go to LCCC for like logistics, like for me. So LCCC logistics career captain's course, and there are other options, like you can do like a blended where you do the EWS Expeditionary Warfare School online and in person, and like you'll kind of balance that between um, your full-time job, and you can just do like the online session only, which you do it like in the evening, and then I think they still require you to like do like one session or something in person every now and then. Either way, like those were your options, and the second two options I just spoke about doesn't make sense, right? If you're in a high risk billet, and I would say I was in a high risk billet because a lot of the times what was being told to me from the monitors is like, hey, I have like I can only fill 64% or 70% of the supply officer billets that are available. The other 30% are vacant because there's just not enough of you guys to go around. So we usually get passed over for these education, like your professional military education, and to develop you as a captain, as a Marine Corps officer, because you're getting sent to another job that's like, hey, they need somebody to fill in this position. And it's unfortunate because like I knew people that got selected for these schools that shouldn't have been selected. They should have been transitioned out, and or maybe not transitioned out, but like they just were at the bottom of the totem pole. And compared to my peers, because you can see that stuff, right? How you're doing rank compared to your peers. I was on the top tier, and I didn't get selected because of my job in the Marine Corps, right? I was a supply officer, and there's not enough of us to go around, so they just shuffled us from unit to unit. And what my monitor was telling me is like, hey, you're not going to go to your professional military education next. I can't send you. I can't afford you to go. If you stay in and don't transition out, I'm gonna send you to another unit. I'm gonna send you back to the fleet. And I was like, okay, but when am I going to get my education? He's like, well, you can do the blended, or you can do these other options. Like, no, fuck that. Excuse my French. Like, look, I'm already working in a high risk billet, right? As a supply officer, and I'll get into this in another video. Like, you're dealing with your budget, you're dealing with accounting, you're dealing with procurement, logistics, you're doing your like inventories, you're dealing with all your military equipment, property equipment. If you mess any of these things up, and they'll fire you in an instant. Like they don't play with weapons, they don't play with money, property. Like that stuff gets you fired really fast. You got to be on top of your game as a supply officer, as a supply chief, anything in logistics. Like you got to be on top of your game. So like it doesn't make sense for me to work really hard in this position, 10-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts. You know, I'm working way harder than a lot of these other captains or these other officers in the same rank, and I'm not getting paid extra for that. I'm getting the same salary. I'm putting in way more hours, and for what? Like so that I don't get to go to my professional military education next. I'm just gonna get sent to another unit where I'm gonna have to work just as hard, if not harder, because every time you go from unit to unit in the supply officer position, and you need to do a turnover, you need to do your investigation, you need to assess your account, you need to like it's like a 6 month process, 6 to 8 month process to get that account functioning and rolling again, especially if the last guy didn't do you justice and didn't give you a good turnover. So I'm gonna get sent to another unit, or I'm gonna get out. I don't have the option to go to these education to for personal development, growth in the service, and to get like my promotion. When I get looked at for a promotion for major, it's gonna look bad that I don't have any of these things done, and they're gonna be like, well, why didn't you get any of it done? Why don't you do the 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 blended, or why didn't you do the online one? And I'm like, because like I'm working way harder than some of these other people, and you're rewarding them for not working as hard. But because I'm in this position, in a high risk position, and you guys need to move me around, and I got to do the needs of the Marine Corps, I can't get my professional military education, and that doesn't really make sense. And a lot of I don't know why it's like that, and hopefully that's changed a little bit. But when you go to expeditionary warfare school, you go to class. You're going. It's like going to school. However, your classes are from like 9 to 2 o'clock, and you get a nice lunch break, right? You're working like not even working. You're just going to school for like 5 to 6 hours of the day. Um, Same thing with logistics captain's course, career course, right? You're not going to operations, and you're not going to the field, and you're not doing hikes, and you're not doing all kinds of extra stuff, going to meetings and all these things. You just go to school, and you're getting paid for it for 10 months. That's for EWS. If you go to LCCC, the logistics career captain's course, it's like 5 or 6 months, something like that, or 4 months. But you're just going to school. So those people get to just go to school, kind of relax, reset for those 10 months, and then they go back to the fleet, or they go back to fill in another position, right? And they've completed the requirement for the next promotion step, so that when they're on that review board, like they've completed the requirements, and now it looks better for them. When I'm like, hey, I'm over here fulfilling the needs of the Marine Corps, going from billet to grind, to make sure that I'm filling the needs of the Marine Corps. But my professional military education, my resume in the military doesn't look as good because I didn't go to these schools, and I didn't do the extra stuff that I need to do, the evening courses. Like, no, with you're not getting paid extra for that stuff, right? And these people are getting paid for it, and they're hanging out, having a good time. Um, so that's like that was also part of it. Like that's unfair. Um, and I got it. Life isn't fair, right? But like, hey, there's like enough is enough, right? You can't just abuse me, wear me out completely, and then expect me to do 20 years, expect me to continue to do good work, and serve my country when you're not being fair and just to all of the jobs, all of the MOSs, all of the officers. So I'm making $12 an hour when they're making their full salary because of the hours I'm working, right? Compared to what they're making when they're just going to school. And it's not like they get homework and like super crazy stuff. Like, dude, like they're gonna pass you no matter what in these courses. Like whether you do poor, you're just at the bottom of the class. You do good, you're at the top of the class. Okay, boom, you get a little reward or something. But they're gonna pass you regardless. Okay. All right. Enough of me grappling on that piece. But really, what I'm trying to get down to is the PME system and the way they elect these officers for professional military education isn't very good. Right, it needs some improvement in how they select these officers to go to these education um, opportunities, right, and how they get selected instead of just kind of closing your eyes and going, all right, these guys are gonna go. Like it should be based off of a merit system. Whereas, like, hey, like these guys did really good regardless of what position they hold, because a lot of the times people don't want to let their best people go because they're losing that capability, right? Like you're not going to send your best person to go, on a B billet or go do something that's not in their duty, because now you need somebody strong to fill in those shoes, and a lot of times that's what happens. They don't want to let go of their good people. It's funny because I'll give you this example. When I was at Second Battalion, Fourth Marines, we didn't have an equal opportunity officer, and the XO at the time, the executive officer, pulled me in the office. He's like, Felipe, you've been doing such a great job. He's like, you are killing it. Like you filled in those shoes of your predecessor and you freaking outgrew them. You know what that means? And I was like, I'm gonna get more pay, sir. And he like laughed. He's like, no. He said, more responsibility. And I was like, oh, great. So I've been working from like 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night because I had to educate and train my Marines so that I didn't have all this workload. So I had to train them because you get a lot of new guys, especially when you go into a new unit that just got back from deployment. They've already had all their people transition out. They get the new people transitioning in. And you got to train them and educate them and develop them so that they do their jobs well and they perform. Well, I was working hard and freaking I was putting in like 16-hour days, guys. I wouldn't even eat lunch, right? I eat lunch at my desk. So I would go 6 a.m. to like 9 p.m., get home, eat some food, shower, go to sleep, wake up, go back and do it again. Um, and then now he wants to give me all this extra work when there's officers that aren't working as hard as that, right? Like your S2 officer, your intelligence officer. The guy's working freaking 6 hours a day, if that, right? Um, and I went to all the field training and all that stuff, all the operations and all that stuff. Like they took us with them, so you get rewarded with more work for being good, right? So that's the unfortunate thing, and why people commands wouldn't want to send you out and do all these take on all these opportunities to go actually have some fun, do some good work, or all these other things that you would want to do, travel or whatever the case may be, because they don't want to lose you and that capability, right? They don't want to fall short in those areas. So what they do is they just don't send you, and they're like, "Hey, we can't lose you, so we're not going to send you." That kind of stuff. So, all right, last thing. Um, last thing. So with this, I was in a weird situation, right? Because I was like, hey, am I going to get the opportunity to go to professional military education or not? And the monitor already had told me, he's like, you're not. You're going to go back to another supply officer position and you're going to grind it out. And I was like, okay. Um, well, that's kind of unfortunate, right? But I was coming up on my 7 years. So if I didn't go to my professional military education, which if I did, I would incur 2 years of obligation after that. So I would have done the military education, like professional development, which was either 10 months or like 4 or 5 months. But you incur the 2 year obligation after that. So because I didn't get that either way, well, I was still at seven. If I took on the orders, it's another 2 years of obligated time. If I took those orders to another unit, which would put me at nine, right? I'm kind of like I'm hitting that halfway mark. So I had to make the decision. Hey, do I stay in? Do I not? At this point, I'm in the halfway. I'm picking up major at this point. Am I going to be able to go to military education? Am I not? Like, what's going to happen? And if you go to military education again, you will do 2 years of obligated time. And I was like, well, that would put me at 12. It was putting me in a situation where I was either going to be forced to stay in or not, right? Like I was either going to get forced out. Um, I wanted to have that option myself. And it worked out for me, right? Because I was able to get out on time. I did the hard work to find my replacement, not the monitor, which is their job, to move people around. So, and I got accepted into my Master's of Business program. I'm just about finishing that up, and I got a very good paying job, a good salary. my military benefits, your GI, your disability, like all these things that you rate after you get out, and the opportunities, they're just there. So it was definitely worth it for me to get out. Maybe not so for others, and depending where they're at in their career or where you're at in your career. So that's all I have for you guys, as to why I hung up, like these two big, hung up my uniform, these two big factors, the people that determine where you go, and those opportunities, um, and how they select people to take on these the billets and the professional military education that follows your first tour or each rank, kind of, pretty much, right? So yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully the quality is better on this one. So thank you for watching. Go ahead, like, subscribe if you like the content, and I will be bringing some more of that out here soon. Thank you.